Alright, what is up guys? So this is going to be the next part in my weapon guide series, and as you can see from the title of the video and from what I'm showing currently on screen, the weapon we are going to be going over currently is the Falchion. Falchion is probably the most widely used fighter weapon in the game. It is incredibly strong at a low gear level, and it is still very, very strong at a high gear level. Falchion is just kind of been the go-to fighter weapon for a very, very long time. A lot of different reasons it's strong. The best one and the most important is it has incredibly high base damage. As you see, as a white one, it has 36, and then on legendaries, it has 43 or 44, purple's 41 or 42. But incredibly high base damage. And the best part about this weapon is because the base damage is so high, you don't have to build damage for it to still do solid amounts of damage. Even with, literally zero power built and shit with a legendary Falchion, not even with, a good rolled legendary Falchion, you can still hit 90s, almost up to 100 if you're running Sword Mastery, which I do run Sword Mastery sometimes with Falchion. Not always, but I do sometimes. So, other than that, the very, very big upside of it is its moveset. It has very wide sweeps. They're not entirely horizontal, they're a bit diagonal, but it has very wide sweeps, so it's very easy just to hit anyone in front of you. You can cleave through multiple people with it, so in a team fight, in a melee, it's very, very good because of all the people you're hitting. However, on the downside, because of this moveset, which I will put on the screen here, because of this moveset, it is very, very likely that you do not body shot people. You mostly hit their arms. Because you're swinging these very wide, horizontal diagonal swings, you don't really get a chance to body shot. And if you go for headshots, it's incredibly easy to miss because Falchion is pretty damn slow. Even with a lot of action speed, it's not the fastest weapon. And the way it swings can be pretty misleading. Generally speaking, you have to aim lower than you need to. Normally, you think you'd have to aim higher, but you don't. It's if you aim too low, because how the weapon works is it's really weird, is it starts on the right side of your screen, but in the startup of the weapon's attack, it doesn't have a hitbox. So even though it looks like your weapon is swinging, it's not actually doing anything yet, and it doesn't really start getting a hitbox till almost the middle of your screen. So it's very, very easy to, like, swing and be like, how did I hit that guy? And you go back and watch it back, and your weapon literally swung straight through him because the hitbox wasn't active yet. And then even then, people that are like actively moving around, like, jumping, ducking, that type of thing, it is almost impossible to hit anything but arm shots. So with this being said, that is the biggest downside to the Falchion. Other than that, it is a 25 move speed penalty weapon, which is pretty heavy. It's the same weight as, some other, like, one-handed weapons, I think. Actually, I'm not even sure, right? I'm not even 100% sure on that. I actually can't think of what would be 25 because I was gonna say Morningstar, but I forgot Morningstar is 20. This isn't 25. But thing is, it's like very high damage, but it is also pretty heavy. The downside to that, I mean, there's no real good crafted ones either. You have access to the Falchion of Honor. This isn't that good anymore because it rolls. I mean, all it does is rolls armor pin, but it's a purple, so it's not fantastic. It doesn't roll like, like action speed or something like the Lightbringer would. Now that you can craft this anyways. I mean, it's also now the Centaur's Madness. This thing is unusable. But overall, it's just like the crafted ones aren't that great, and it is an okay weapon. But the best way to describe Falchion is like a brute force weapon, right? It takes no finesse, takes no skill. It is basically the exact opposite of Arming Sword, where Arming Sword is the very skillful weapon that requires knowing what you're doing to play. Falchion is the just hold left click weapon, right? It is just, I am going to sweep through your team, hit really, really hard. And the third hit is basically like, it's not single target, but it's basically a vertical attack that has very, very high damage. The really, really good part of Falchion that it works really, really well on, because obviously it's good on plate, right? But I think where it shines best is on Slayer. Because on Slayer, you build a ton of damage, you have all this weapon damage, you have all this fizz power you're building, and you have really high action speed. So Falchion, it can literally, like, two-shot most people. That's what I normally use on Slayer now, but it hits incredibly hard on Slayer. Not as hard as it used to, like, the days of having 200 damage Falchion hits, we're not there anymore, but the damage on it is still incredibly high. And all things considered, it's not super expensive to buy them, because people almost always pick them up, and it's a very, very common weapon. it's not that expensive, so making a kit with the Falchion's good. Like I said, the thing I like the most about it is because the base damage is so high, it allows you to build into other stats, primarily defensive stats, and you still have okay damage. Whereas if you did that with an arming sword, or for example, then you just would be hitting for nothing, right? You're hitting for like 70s. Then, you know, you look at Falchion compared to Morningstar, because Morningstar is like the direct competitor to Falchion. Arming Sword, not as much. Arming Sword's just completely different ballpark. But the direct competitor is Morningstar, because you see, Morningstar looks on paper significantly better, right? It's 1 less damage for 5 less move speed penalty and 15% armor pen. And like, yeah, that sounds, you know, that sounds pretty insane. However, the big downside to Morningstar, like I mentioned in my Arming Sword video, is it has really, really bad sour spots. Really bad sour spots. The Falchion doesn't. So literally the sole reason that I run Falchion over Morningstar whenever I do is for rogues. If a rogue gets in melee on you and you have a Morningstar versus a Falchion, it's almost always a loss because you're going to be permanently sour spotting them and you're going to be doing literally no damage whatsoever. Falchion, on the other hand, doesn't really have that issue. You hit on pretty much any part of the blade on Falchion and, you know, you're going to crack them. Like, it's GG. Also, because it does have those sweeps, it's very, very easy to hit rogues, even if they're trying to, like, you know, roll around you or, like, everything, like, move really fast around you and stab you in the back. Like, just trying to dodge your attacks. Doesn't really happen with the Falchion. With Morningstar, it's way harder to hit them because you have those vertical hits. Even a slight misstep and you will miss them. Another good part of Falchion is Falchion has, like I said, its startup animation for hitting isn't that good, but it does have a ton of active frames once you actually get your hitbox going, which means you can swing, you can like whip it around. I uploaded a short recently where I literally go for the third swing, I slap some guy in the head, whip a 180, and hit the other guy behind me with it while it's still going. Arming Sword, that's just not realistic, and one of the reasons, it's not that it's not entirely realistic, but the problem is, and it's not even necessarily a problem, is Arming Sword is really fast, so generally you don't have the time to do that. If you hit somebody, by the time you whip a 180, the hit is almost over, so you're going for another. Falchion, because it has slower swings, it allows you to do things like that, like drag your hit from one person to the other. Now, moving on from just, like, you know, the weapon and space stats, I think the thing is, like I mentioned with Arming Sword, is you still can use Shield Mastery, yes. With Falchion, it's not nearly as good, in my opinion, just because of how slow the Falchion swings are. Even though you get the 50% action speed, it's not always going to give you that, you know, hit block without taking any damage. It's just not always going to happen. There are plenty of times where you're not going to be fast enough and they're going to hit you anyways. Other than that, you know, none of these other perks are really, like, super important for Falchion. Like, you know, it works good with combo attack because it has high base damage. The Fizz damage bonus increases it a lot, but you're not building this, so it doesn't super matter. And in terms of skills, once again, none of these are very, very relevant. One thing that is worth mentioning, though, for Falchion is, so the really, really good part about this, that it actually has a pretty big leg up over every other weapon here, Arming Sword and Morningstar, and Flange Mace, if you want to consider that, is that because of its horizontal, you know, slash diagonal attacks, it's really easy to get around guards on this. Incredibly easy. Because all you have to do is you just crouch and you hit their feet. Also, in that same kind of ballpark, fighting Longsword. Falchion is one of the best weapons to fight Longsword with because you can just you know, like slash at their feet and then slam your weapon into the ground and reset your chain and just keep doing the first hit over and over and over. Also, if, you know, they mess up and they do let you get a big swing off on them because they stab you, then you hit really, really hard as opposed to Arming Sword not hitting that hard. Other than that, a downside to the Falchion, because, you know, I've been only talking about positives mostly for the horizontal swings. A really big downside to Falchion is you can't really swing it in closed-in spaces. Fighting in a doorway with this thing is damn near impossible. You're almost always going to be swinging into walls, which is not ideal. And another big downside that if you watch me, you see this all the time. If you are playing a comp that has more than one melee, it is really, really easy to hit your teammates. Really, really easy to hit your teammates. And I do it all the time, whether it's because they walk in front of me, they walk beside me, but the Falchion, just with how wide its swings are, you are almost, like, it's people to your left or to your right, even if they're not, like, directly in your view. It's not hard at all to hit them. I hit my teammates all the time with this weapon. Yeah, there's not a ton else to say about the weapon. The Falchion is a very, very simple weapon. Not a lot going for it in terms of like, you know, high level techniques. Like I said, this is really like if this were like a Souls game, Falchion is a strength weapon. This shit has an A scaling in strength and like a D scaling in dex, right? Like it is just I'm going to walk at you and I'm going to hit you and I'm going to hit you really really hard weapon. It doesn't have the finesse of arming sword. But yeah, other than that, not a lot to talk about. So I'm gonna wrap the video up there. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.